Homage to the gem of the Supreme Buddha. The Buddha is my refuge every day. My homage to the gem of the Supreme Dhamma. The Dhamma is my refuge every day. My homage to the gem of the Supreme Sangha. The Sangha is my refuge every day. My homage to the Supreme Triple Gem. The Triple Gem is my refuge every day. Namo Buddhaya. Meritorious devotees, one day our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, explains, O bhikkhus, both you and I have been wandering in this long journey of samsara, which is the journey of birth and death, for one reason. So what did our great teacher say? Both you and I have been wandering so long in this journey of birth and death because of one reason. The Supreme Buddha explains, O bhikkhus, the reason is both you and I did not understand the Four Noble Truths. So meritorious devotees, we have been traveling in this long journey of samsara then because of one reason, and that reason is we weren't able to understand the truth of suffering. We weren't able to understand what is really suffering. We didn't understand that being reborn is suffering. We didn't understand that having to age, having to fall sick, having to die, having to become separated from our loved ones is suffering. We didn't understand having to be together with those we don't like is suffering. And we didn't understand the reality of the five aggregates of clinging. And as a result, we continued in this samsara. And we also didn't understand the cause of suffering. We didn't understand the second noble truth, the cause of suffering. We didn't understand that we suffer in this world because of craving. And we didn't understand the fact that it is indeed possible to be free from suffering. And we didn't understand that there is actually a path that leads to being free from suffering. Meritorious devotees, it is only the Tathagata, the great sage, who arises in this world, who teaches the path that allows beings roaming, wandering in this long journey of samsara to escape from it. A great teacher, when the Blessed One attained supreme enlightenment, sitting under the Bodhi tree in Nikaya over 2,600 years ago, the Blessed One understood through his direct knowledge, through his wisdom, that the only way to escape from this suffering, from all suffering in this world, is one path. The Blessed One explains that path is the Noble Eightfold Path. So meritorious devotees, if you're interested in escaping from all suffering, if you're interested in finding real happiness, then there's only one thing you must do, and that is to practice, develop the Eightfold Path. So today we're going to learn a beautiful sutta that explains about the Noble Eightfold Path. This sutta is found in the Samyutta Nikaya, in the Magga Samyutta of the Pali Canon. And the name of this sutta is known as the Brahmana Sutta. So meritorious devotees, during that time, our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, was living in Savatthi. And in the morning, Most Venerable Ananda, as you know, Venerable Ananda was our great teacher's supporter, our great teacher's personal attendant for 25 years. He was there with our great teacher like the shadow that never leaves for 25 years. And so this Venerable Ananda, dressed and taking the bowl and robe, went to the city of Savatthi for alms. And then Venerable Ananda saw Brahmin Janusoni. So he saw a Brahmin named Janusoni departing from Savatthi in an all-white chariot drawn by horses, female horses. So what did Venerable Ananda see? Venerable Ananda saw a Brahmin named Janusoni departing, so leaving the city of Savatthi in an all-white chariot. Now, it said here, the horses yoked to this chariot were white in color. Its ornaments of the ornaments of the vehicle were also white in color. The chariot was also white, and its upholstery was also white. The reins, the goad, the canopy were also white. And Brahmin Janusoni's clothes were also white. His turban, no, he's a Brahmin, so he was wearing a turban, and his turban was also white. And his sandals were also white. And the fan, the white chowri, the chowri that was used to fan him was also white. So everything, the vehicle, everything was white in color. So people, having seen this, said, "Wow, divine indeed, sir, is this vehicle. It appears to be a divine vehicle indeed, sir." So now what did people say? When they saw this Brahmin Janusoni traveling in this vehicle that's fully white, they were very amazed. They said, "Divine, this vehicle is divine. Divine indeed, sir, is the vehicle. It appears to be a divine vehicle." So they were very amazed. They were mesmerized to see this vehicle that's all white. So the horses are white, the ornaments of the vehicle is white, the chariot, the upholstery is white, the rein, the goad is white, the driver is white. So everyone is white in color. And so when they saw this, they were quite amazed. Now, even in the ordinary society, when we see a very good-looking make of a vehicle, we also take a second look at it, isn't it? In the normal world, people do this. When they see the latest make of a vehicle, they say, "Wow, that's excellent, that's a really good vehicle." And they take a second look at it. So this is the same thing. So when these people saw this very interesting looking, very divine looking vehicle, they stopped for a second and they took a look at it, and they were amazed at it. And so they called it a divine vehicle. So now Venerable Ananda saw these people speaking like this. And so Venerable Ananda went for alms, walked for alms in Savatthi, and he returned from his alms round. And after his meal, he approached the Blessed One, he paid homage to him, sat down to one side, and he said, "Venerable Sir, in the morning when I went for alms, I saw the Brahmin Janusoni leaving the city of Savatthi in an all-white chariot drawn by mares. Mares means female horses. And this vehicle, this chariot was all white, and when people saw this, they said, "Divine indeed, sir, is this vehicle. It appears to be a divine vehicle indeed, sir." So Venerable Ananda told our great teacher about what happened when he went on the alms round. As you know, Venerable Ananda is a Sotapanna disciple. For the 25 years that he attended to the Buddha, he was only a Sotapanna disciple. He was not an Arahant. And so, being a Sotapanna disciple, his mind is always within the Dhamma. And so, after having seen that incident, Venerable Ananda asked a beautiful question. Venerable Ananda asks, "Venerable Sir, is it possible, Venerable Sir, to point out a divine vehicle in this Dhamma and discipline?" So what did Venerable Ananda ask? "Venerable Sir, is it possible to point out a divine vehicle in this Dhamma and discipline?" So now he is comparing what he saw in the morning, and he's trying to match it, compare it to the Dhamma. So now he wants to know, just like there are very amazing looking vehicles in the ordinary society, he wants to know, in the Dhamma Virabhasa, is there a divine vehicle? You can see you can see the way these amazing noble beings think. And so, of course, at that time, my great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, said, Ananda, yes, it is possible. It is possible to point out a divine vehicle in this Dhamma. Ananda, this is a designation for this noble eightfold path. So this divine vehicle is it's a designation for the noble eightfold path. The Supreme Buddha explains, the divine vehicle, the vehicle of Dhamma, the unsurpassed victory in battle, all of these are designation to the noble eightfold path. The divine vehicle is the noble eightfold path. What do we use a vehicle for? We use a vehicle to get somewhere, to reach a destination, isn't it? In the ordinary world, if you want to reach a certain place, then we get into a vehicle and we leave. And so our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, explains in this Dhamma, in the dispensation, the divine vehicle that takes you to the supreme goal, the pure destination of Nibbana, is the noble eightfold path. It's amazing, isn't it? And so our great teacher explains, Ananda, right view. Now, right view in Pali is known as Samma Ditti. So the Blessed One explains, right view, Ananda, when developed and cultivated, has as its final goal the removal of lust, the removal of hatred, the removal of delusion. So what did the Supreme Buddha say? The Supreme Buddha explains, right view, the first factor of the Noble Eightfold Path is right view. The Blessed One explains, right view, when you develop it, when you cultivate it, has its final goal the removal of lust, the removal of hatred, the removal of delusion. Meritorious devotees, our great teacher explains, Nibbana, attaining Nibbana, is the complete abandonment, complete eradication of desire, hatred and delusion. So if someone practices the Noble Eightfold Path, that person is able to completely eradicate desire, hatred and delusion. And then the Supreme Buddha explains the rest of the factors. Right intention, which is known as Samma Vayam. Right intention, O Ananda, has its final goal the removal of lust, the removal of hatred, the removal of delusion. Right speech, right actions, right effort, right mindfulness. In this way, the Supreme Buddha explains the complete Eightfold Path, and the Supreme Buddha explains, O bhikkhus, this Eightfold Path has its final goal the removal of lust, the removal of hatred, and the removal of delusion. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, in this way, Ananda, it may be understood how this is a designation for this Noble Eightfold Path. So the Blessed One explains, Ananda, the Noble Eightfold Path is known as the divine vehicle, the vehicle of Dhamma, the unsurpassed victory in battle, because if someone practices the Noble Eightfold Path, it takes you to the destination where there is no desire, where there is no hatred, where there is no delusion. Meritorious devotees, then it's quite important that we know exactly what the Noble Eightfold Path is. Because if we don't know what the Noble Eightfold Path is, then how can we start to practice it? And so it's quite important that we have a clear understanding of what right view is, what right intention is, what right speech, what right actions are. what right effort is, what right livelihood is, what right mindfulness is, and what right concentration is. Because if you do not have the right clear understanding, then there is no way that we can develop it. In the present world, a lot of people define the Eightfold Path in many different ways as a result of not knowing the direct words of the Supreme Buddha. So it's quite important that we get our knowledge of Dhamma through direct teachings of the Supreme Buddha. So let's learn what the Noble Eightfold Path is from the words, from the true words of our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha. Meritorious devotees, our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, explains to us very clearly about what right view is. The Supreme Buddha explains, O bhikkhus, what is right view? The Supreme Buddha explains, right view is knowledge of suffering. So knowledge of suffering means knowing, understanding that being reborn is suffering. If you are not born in this world, then we wouldn't have to face all these painful things that we are facing in this world. We wouldn't have to face aging, we wouldn't have to fall sick, we wouldn't have to be separated from our loved ones, and we won't have to die if we are not born in this world. So the Supreme Buddha explains having to be born is suffering, and you must understand it as being suffering. And so the Supreme Buddha explains, if someone has the knowledge of suffering, and so if someone has the knowledge of the origin of suffering, what is the origin of suffering? The Blessed One explains, craving is the origin of suffering. If we do not have craving within us, we wouldn't suffer. The Supreme Buddha explains, we have this craving for sensual pleasures. We crave to see attractive things. We crave to hear attractive sounds. In this way, we crave sensual pleasures. And we also crave to be reborn again. We want to be born in good destinations. We have a craving for it. And sometimes when we are so fed up with life, sometimes we have this feeling that you don't want to exist in this world. Now for non-existence. In this way we have craving within us. We crave sensual pleasures. We crave for existence. We also crave for non-existence. The Supreme Buddha explains, this craving is what causes suffering. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, right view, it is actually possible to be free from suffering. As you know, our great teacher became free from suffering. So if we don't know that it's possible to be free from suffering, then there is no way that we can go any further from there. So the Supreme Buddha explains, if someone knows for a fact, if someone has the knowledge that it's possible to be free from suffering, then he has the right view. And if someone has the knowledge of the way leading to the cessation means becoming free from suffering. That is, if he knows that the Noble Eightfold Path is what leads to the cessation of suffering, then he has the right view. So this is the right view. So having an understanding of the Four Noble Truths, not completely, you don't have to understand the Four Noble Truths completely, but if you understand the Four Noble Truths at least to a certain extent, then you have come to the right view. You have gained the right view. So the Supreme Buddha explains, this is the right view. The Supreme Buddha explains, if someone gains this right view, then that person will definitely attain Nibbana. The Supreme Buddha explains, next, O bhikkhus, what is right intention? So then the second factor of the Noble Eightfold Path is right intention. The Blessed One explains what right intention is. The Blessed One explains, intention of renunciation, intention of non-ill will, and intention of harmlessness. This is called right intention. So in Pali it's known as Nekkhamma Sankappa, Avyapada Sankappa, Avihimsa Sankappa. What Nekkhamma Sankappa is thoughts or intentions to be free from sensual pleasures. Now, as you know, in the normal everyday life, we are always seeking sensual pleasures. We are seeking to see beautiful things, beautiful sounds. We are seeking to hear beautiful sounds. We are always seeking to smell something very good. And we're always seeking to eat something delicious. We're always seeking to please our tongue, and we're always looking to give comfort to this body. That's known as sensual pleasures. And so in the normal everyday life, the normal person does everything to please his senses. However, the Supreme Buddha explains, if someone wants to be free from these sensual pleasures, if someone makes an effort, or rather if someone has the intention or the thought of becoming free from these sensual pleasures, then he's practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. He's developing the right intention. So this is why our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, explains, on Poya days, on full moon days, as householders, you must practice or you must observe the 8 precepts. Now, when you observe the 8 precepts, what you're doing is, even for that day, even if it's temporary, you're practicing these thoughts of renunciation. That means thoughts of being separate from sensual pleasures, because on that day you refrain yourself from eating after 12 o'clock. So you're not indulging in food on that day. And you refrain yourself from embellishing yourself, decorating your using makeup, using different jewelries. You refrain from making yourself look good, and you use very simple chairs and beds. You don't try to please your body by finding comfort. So you're leading a very simple life, a life that's separate from sensual pleasures. If someone has the intention of becoming free from sensual pleasures, then that person is practicing the right intention. And then the Supreme Buddha explains intentions of non-will, non-ill will. That is avyapada sankappa. That is, in the everyday life, we're always angry. We get angry when people don't do things the way we want. If we try to listen to the Dhamma and when people are making such a big noise, we get angry. So we get angry because they're not doing things the way we want. We get angry. Those are all ill will. And so the Supreme Buddha explains, as someone who's practicing the path that leads to Nibbana, the Eightfold Path, you must practice non-ill will. That is, thoughts of loving kindness. So as someone who's practicing this path, you must practice loving kindness. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, avyapada sankappa, avihimsa sankappa. Avihimsa sankappa means intentions of harmlessness. Now, our mind, the ordinary mind, always wants to harm someone. If someone says something bad to us, we say things back to them because we want to hurt their feelings. That is harming others. Or if someone hits us, we hit them back because we want to harm them. We have these thoughts of harming others within us. The Supreme Buddha explains, with those thoughts do not take you to Nibbana. If you want to reach Nibbana, you must practice thoughts of harmlessness, that is, refraining yourself from harming others. So that is, the Supreme Buddha explains, that is what is right intention. What is it? Right intention is intentions of renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness. So that is right intention. That is the second factor in the Noble Eightfold Path. And so far we have discussed about 2 factors. The first is right view, that is, getting a good understanding of the 4 Noble Truths. And the second is right intention, that is, thoughts of renunciation, that is, thoughts of being separate from sensual pleasures, thoughts of non-ill will, that is thoughts of loving kindness, and thoughts of harmlessness, not harming others in any way, physically or verbally, in any way. And then the Supreme Buddha explains the third factor. The third factor you must develop. And the third factor is right speech. The Supreme Buddha explains what is right speech. Now when we simply say right speech, if we don't have a good definition, then we can't clearly understand how we must speak, what we must refrain from doing. So here the Supreme Buddha clearly explains to us how we must manipulate our speech, how we must control our speech. The Blessed One explains, if you are someone who wants to develop this Noble Eightfold Path, then you must be someone who do not speak false speech. That means you must always speak the truth. Even if it may cause a big damage to you, a noble disciple would never lie. He would always speak the truth. And if you're someone who wants to practice this path, you must be someone who do not say divisive speech. What is divisive speech? Divisive speech means words that break people's friendships. The Supreme Buddha explains, you go to one group of people and you say things like, so and so did this, he said this, he did that, and you try to break their friendships. And then you listen to what they say, you listen to their comments, and then you go to the other side and you say, so and so said this to you, this is how he feels about you. Now your goal is to break the friendship between those two people. The Blessed One explains that is divisive speech. So as a noble disciple, you should be someone who should try to refrain yourself from saying divisive speech. Now this divisive speech is so subtle. Sometimes you may say things to another person thinking you're doing good for him, but inside what you're really trying to do is try to break the friendship within. So you must be very careful about your speech. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, if you're someone who wants to develop this path, if you're someone who wants to practice right speech, you must also stop saying harsh words to people. Now, as you know, when we get angry, we say many harsh words to people. We call people names. We say hurtful things to them. The Supreme Buddha explains, if a certain word breaks the peace within another person's mind, that's considered harsh speech. So if you say certain things to another person and it destroys that person's peace of mind, then that's considered harsh speech. So a noble disciple must make sure he or she does not say these harsh words that hurt other people's feelings. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, as a noble disciple, you must also refrain from saying idle chatter. Idle chatter means words that are pointless. And you must try to engage in the 10 forms of wholesome speech, that is talking about how you can develop virtue, how can you develop concentration, talking about how can I be free from desire and have very few desires in my life. How can I improve my effort that I have? So speaking in this way, these are the things that allow you to develop further. The Supreme Buddha explains, if you speak things that are pointless, such as speaking about women, speaking about men, speaking about the government, speaking about flowers, speaking about things that are pointless, they do not allow you to develop your path. So it's quite difficult living in the normal society. It's quite difficult to control your speech in this way. But as noble disciples, as much as you can, you must try to refrain yourself from getting into these idle chatter. If you know a group of people are talking utterlessly, pointlessly, then you must, slowly walk away. Of course, without making them angry. So in this way, you must be very skillful if you want to develop this path. And so the Supreme Buddha explains, that is, right speech. So as a noble disciple, you must practice these things in your everyday life. That is what's known as practicing the path. And then our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, explains, as a noble disciple, you must also practice the fourth factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. That is right action. Now what is right action? The Blessed One clearly explains, right action is refraining yourself from killing other living beings. Now it may be as simple as refraining yourself from killing a mosquito who comes and bites you. You know, the size of the animal is irrelevant. If it's a living being, it's a living being. So if you kill a living being, then you're walking away from the path that leads to real happiness. So as a noble disciple, you must make sure that you do not kill living beings. And the Supreme Buddha explains, right action is also refraining from taking what is not given to you. That is, you must not steal. The Supreme Buddha explains, whether it be in a village, whether it be in a forest, if something is not given to you, then you must not take it. Of course, if you take something from another person out of trust, then it's okay. For example, suppose you need a book and you take it from another person because you know he is trustworthy, that you know he will give it to you. So you take it, you use it, and you put it back. That's not, of course, stealing. But taking with a mind of stealing, taking something from another, that is stealing. So you must refrain yourself from doing that. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, you must also refrain yourself from engaging in sexual misconduct, that is, cheating on your wife or husband. You must not cheat on your spouse. You must be faithful to your wife or husband, and you must not engage in sexual misconduct. That is considered right action. And then our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, explains, now so far we have discussed about four factors, that is right view, right intention, right speech, and right action. Now the fifth factor of this Noble Eightfold Path is right livelihood. Now what is livelihood? Livelihood is the way you make a living. So you may be doing a certain job, and through that you must make sure you do it righteously. Now righteously means you do not cheat others, you do not lie to others, you do not engage in fraud in making a living. As you know, in the ordinary world, many people do wrong things to make money. They take bribes, they engage in fraud, they steal from other people, they lie to other people, they cheat other people to make money. But as a noble disciple, you shouldn't do any of those things. You must make a living, you must do your job righteously, in the right way. As someone who is virtuous, who protects the precepts, you must practice this path. The Supreme Buddha explains that if you do certain jobs, then that's considered the wrong livelihood. The Supreme Buddha explains, you must not trade people as slaves. You must not sell weapons as your job or to make a living. You must also not sell weapons as a way of making a living. And the Supreme Buddha explains, you must also refrain from doing all these wrong things. And the Supreme Buddha explains, you must also refrain from killing animals, so for example, for meat. So all of these things, the Supreme Buddha explains, are wrong livelihood. So as a noble disciple, you must make sure you refrain yourself from all of these things, and you must try to do your job righteously, in the right way, in accordance with the Dhamma. The Blessed One explains, here a noble disciple, having abandoned a wrong mode of livelihood, earns his living by a right livelihood. This is called right livelihood. So the Supreme Buddha clearly defines what right livelihood is. And then our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, explains the sixth factor in the Noble Eightfold Path, and that is right effort. So now I'm sure you have heard in many places about right effort, but you may wonder what is really right effort. Now, if you make an effort to build a house, is that also considered right effort? If you make an effort to encourage your children to do well in school, is that also right effort? So you might be confused if you do not know the direct words of the Supreme Buddha. If you do not know the direct teaching of the Supreme Buddha, then you might get confused. And when people define these terms in different ways, you'll get confused. You become, you get in doubt. You get doubts. So the Supreme Buddha in this sutta clearly explains what right effort is. The Supreme Buddha explains, here a bhikkhu generates desire for the non-arising of unarisen, evil, unwholesome states. So you make an effort for the non-arising of unarisen, evil, unwholesome states. For example, evil, unwholesome states could be anger or jealousy. And so as a noble disciple, you must make an effort to make sure those evil, unwholesome states such as jealousy or anger does not arise within you. So in order to do this, you must make an effort to practice loving kindness and spread equanimity, do meditations such as sympathetic joy meditation, that is mudita meditation, to get rid of jealousy. And you must do metta meditation to practice loving kindness. When you do this, what you're doing is you're making an effort to stop non-arisen evil things from arising. So you're making effort. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, you make an effort to abandon. You make an effort to abandon arisen, evil, unwholesome states. So for example, suppose you are angry now. Someone has done something that you don't like, and you're now angry. Now you have recognized yourself as being angry. Now what should you do as someone who wants to develop right effort? You must practice loving kindness meditation, because when you do that, you can abandon the anger that have arisen. Or suppose you have developed a desire towards someone. You have lust within your mind. You have seen someone so attractive and you have lust within you. And when you have recognized that that's an unwholesome state, what should you do? You must practice the foulness meditation. So that is making an effort to abandon what is unwholesome. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, you shouldn't stop there. You must also make an effort to develop further the wholesome states that you have developed. Now for example, say you're someone who's virtuous, you're someone who protects the 5 precepts. Suppose you're someone who protects the 5 precepts. However, you must not be satisfied with just protecting the 5 precepts. You must make a further effort, and on Poya days, on full moon days, you must try to protect the 8 precepts. So this is what's known as developing the wholesome states that you have already developed. So developing it further. And if you're someone who's practicing meditation, you must develop it further and try to gain jhanas, that means absorptive levels of meditation. So you're trying to develop the wholesome things that you have and develop it even to a further degree. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, you must also make an effort to develop wholesome states that you do not have already. Now that means if you're someone who do not meditate, if you're someone who do not have a concentrated mind, you must make an effort to develop meditation, practice meditation, and develop a concentrated mind. So this is known as right effort. So all of these things are making an effort to developing the path. So the Supreme Buddha explains that is the 6th factor, that is right effort. And then the Supreme Buddha explains the 7th factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, and that is right mindfulness. The Supreme Buddha explains what is right mindfulness. The Supreme Buddha explains, you must practice the 4 establishments of mindfulness. What are the 4 establishments of mindfulness? Kaya kayanupassi viharati. What does that mean? Kaya kayanupassi viharati means seeing the body for what it really is. So seeing the body in its reality. Now, as you know, in the normal everyday life, we see this body as being attractive. But our great teacher, Supreme Buddha, explains this body is filled with filth. It's foul. So if you're someone who practices mindfulness, then you're someone who sees the body for what it really is. You see the reality of this body. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, you see the reality of feelings. When you get painful feelings, you're aware, you're mindful that I now have a painful feeling within me. When you feel pleasure, you're quite aware that I'm now feeling pleasure. And when you're feeling neither pleasure or pain, you're aware, right now I'm neither feeling pain nor pleasure. So in this way, as someone who is developing the path, you must be quite mindful of feelings. You must be aware of the reality of feelings. That is, you must know how these feelings arise and how they vanish. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, you must also be mindful of your mind. The Supreme Buddha explains, when your mind is lustful, you must know, now my mind is lustful. When your mind is filled with anger, you must know, now my mind is filled with anger. When your mind is deluded, you must know, my mind is now deluded. So you're quite aware of your own mind. When your mind is restless, you know quite well that your mind is restless. And when you know very well the reality of your mind, then you can little by little purify your mind. This is why the Supreme Buddha explains you must be mindful of your mind. Because if you're not mindful of your mind, if you're not aware of the thoughts that's in your mind, then how can you purify it? If you do not know that there's anger within you, if you do not know there's lust within you, how can you abandon those defilements? So that's why it's quite important that you are quite aware of the reality of your mind. And then our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, explains you must also be mindful of the Dhamma. That is, you must have a good understanding of the 5 hindrances. You must, when your mind is sleepy, when you're restless, when you're overcome by lust, when you're in doubt, you must know you now have the hindrances within you, and you must make an effort to abandon the 5 hindrances. And you must have a good understanding of what the 5 aggregates of clinging are, and you must have a good understanding of these sense faculties. And you must have a good understanding of the 4 Noble Truths. The Supreme Buddha explains, if you're quite mindful, if you're quite aware of this Dhamma, then you're someone who's mindful. So that is considered the 7th factor in the Noble Eightfold Path. And then our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, explains the final part, or the final factor in the Noble Eightfold Path, and that is right concentration. The Supreme Buddha explains attaining the 4 jhanas, the 4 absorptive levels of meditation, is what is known as the right concentration. However, you must realize, the Supreme Buddha explains, this right concentration can only be developed, can be gained, if you practice the 7 other factors that we talked about before. So that means you must have the right view, the right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, and right mindfulness. If you develop these 7 things, then you'll be able to attain the right concentration. The Supreme Buddha explains, O bhikkhus, right concentration is the one-pointedness of the mind. Right concentration is the one-pointedness of the mind. When you have developed the accessories or the supporters, which are the first 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. So if you do not have the 7 factors that we just talked about, it's impossible for you to gain the right concentration. As you know, in the ordinary society, a lot of people tries to attain a samadhi, a concentrated mind. However, it only turns to a right concentration, that is Samma Samadhi, if you only have the 7 factors that we talked about. If you do not have those 7 factors, then it will not turn into Samma Samadhi, right concentration. So a great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, explains, O bhikkhus, these are the 8 factors that you must develop in developing the divine vehicle, which is known as the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, after having said this, our great teacher explains, O bhikkhus, this is what the Supreme Buddha explains, this is what the Blessed One said. And having said this, the fortunate one, the teacher, further said this. And the Supreme Buddha teaches 4 beautiful verses. So the Supreme Buddha says, its qualities of faith and wisdom are always yoked evenly together. Shame is its pole, mind its yoke tie, mindfulness the watchful charioteer. So now the Supreme Buddha is comparing the paths of the chariot to the paths of the noble divine vehicle. So the Supreme Buddha is explaining, as someone who is practicing the path, you must make sure you have the qualities of faith and wisdom. So having confidence and having wisdom is quite important in developing the path. The Supreme Buddha explains, then you must also have mindfulness as the watchful charioteer. Now, as you know, if there isn't a good driver for the vehicle, then that vehicle goes in the wrong path. Just like that, the Supreme Buddha explains, if you do not have mindfulness, then you can go in the wrong path. You can astray in the wrong way. So in this divine vehicle, mindfulness is the watchful charioteer. And then the Blessed One explains, this divine vehicle, the Noble Eightfold Path, its chariot's ornament is virtue. So this path is decorated, ornamented by virtue, by being virtuous. That is, observing the precepts and protecting the precepts. Its axle is the jhana, and energy its wheels. So in this divine vehicle, the wheels is energy. Now, as you know, in a vehicle, if there aren't any wheels, then you can't go any further with that vehicle. Just like that, if you do not make an effort, if you do not have energy to develop wholesome things, then you cannot develop further in the path. So you need energy. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, equanimity keeps the burden balanced. So equanimity helps you to balance this path. And desirelessness serves as upholstery. The Supreme Buddha explains, goodwill, harmlessness, and seclusion, these are the chariot's weaponry. Now, as you know, we use a weapon to fight the enemy. So just like that, we must fight the defilements, unwholesome things that come our way. So when we feel anger, you must use goodwill, loving kindness. When we feel like harming others, you must make sure you engage in harmlessness. And you must also develop seclusion in order to develop this path. And then the Supreme Buddha explains, forbearance is armor and shield. So in this divine vehicle, patience, enduring patiently is the armor and shield. Now, as you know, when we go into a fight, we use the armor to prevent, we use the armor to prevent people from attacking us. And so the Supreme Buddha explains then, being patient, forbearance, patiently enduring is what allows you to guard yourself against defilements. So you must practice patience. The Supreme Buddha explains, there is nothing more supreme than being patient. So these are qualities that you must develop within. And the Supreme Buddha explains, when you have these paths, it rolls towards security from bondage. And in the final verse, the Blessed One explains, this divine vehicle, unsurpassed, originates from within oneself. So this vehicle is not something you can buy. This divine vehicle, the Noble Eightfold Path, is something you must originate, you must develop within yourself. And in the end, the Supreme Buddha explains, the wise depart from the world in it, inevitably winning the victory. So those who are wise get in this divine vehicle of the Noble Eightfold Path, and they escape from this world, they escape from this long journey of samsara, and they attain the pure destination of real happiness, that is, they attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. So meritorious devotees, today we learned a beautiful sutta that explains to us about the divine vehicle that we must make within our lives in order to reach our destination as noble disciples, that is, the destination where there is no rebirth, the destination where there is no death, the destination of Nibbana. The Supreme Buddha explains, Kalyana Mitta, a Kalyana Mitta is what helps you, is the one who helps you to develop this path. The Supreme Buddha explains, and this path is something that you yourself must develop. Nobody else will come and do this for you. So meritorious devotees, I bless you. May you have the opportunity to develop this path. May you have the opportunity to develop these amazing qualities such as faith, wisdom, goodwill, harmfulness, and patience. And may you have the opportunity to realize the Four Noble Truths in this Gautama Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo Buddhaya.